Well, the world is set up in a way according to a scheme where you reap what you sow. In many, I won't say most, but many cases, we don't often get what we deserve. And there is this sense in which we all have new beginnings pretty much all the time. Okay, that sounds like Facebook posts, right? But on a very realistic level, these are truths. And when John writes in 1 John 3, verse 9, no one who is born of God will continue to sin because God's seed remains in them. They cannot go on sinning because they have been born of God. Well, he's saying we are not slaves to, we are not locked in to, excuse me, having no choice but to give in to our instinct to continue to sin. I take that, and there's just a quick recap of what it take me 3 days to do one verse. But here, I think this is, if it's not the bottom line, it is one of the bottom lines. We don't have to continue in sin. We don't have to keep on sinning. That chain of actions and outcomes can be interrupted. And is interrupted because we're God's children. We've been born of Him and we carry His seed. His Spirit is within us. And His Spirit informs, instructs, convicts us of sin. So that, well, what's the point of that? Just guilt? No, here's the thing. Guilt's function is simple. Guilt is emotional pain. And physical pain has one primary function, and that is to get your attention so that you realize something's not right, so you will address whatever it is that is not right that is causing the pain. All right, isn't that what guilt is? Guilt is emotional pain, psychological pain to get our attention so that we can address what is not right. And the Holy Spirit convicts us. And I hesitate to say He makes us feel guilty, but that's one of the ways that it could be looked at. At any rate, when He convicts us of sin, we feel guilt for having done the wrong thing or things. And as a result, if we heed the message of that guilt and conviction, we can break the cycle. And for some of us, it may only be temporary. I'm speaking of myself now. I don't know that I have this an expectation that I will finally be totally done with sin until I'm done with life. But I do know, because God has put His seed in me, because He has claimed me as His son, because I have come into that relationship by embracing His offer of grace, I have this assurance that I can continue to break the chain, to break the cycle, to interrupt this pattern that so often holds me and others like me hostage. And then he goes on in verse 10. This is how we know who the children of God are and who the children of the devil are. Now, wouldn't that be a great thing? I mean, if we had, I don't know if if you're a child of the 60s, then you probably watched Wonder Woman when it was on TV, and she had the lasso of truth. Don't you wish you had a lasso of truth so that when there was a suspect argument, you could throw the lasso of truth around it, and then that person would be unable to tell you anything other than the truth. There is no such lasso. I wish I had a Ronald Ray gun that I could use and that would help me figure out what is truth and what is not truth. Who is God's child? And see, John sets it up where there really are just two options here. Either you're a child of God or you're a child of the devil. And he says there's a way to know who is which. Anyone who does not do what is right is not God's child, nor is anyone who does not love their brother and sister. You see, here's a nuance that is really central to Jesus' teaching and the hope, the good news of the gospel. When we do what is right, we demonstrate. I'm not going to say prove. I can't prove it, but I can demonstrate that I belong to God, that I am His, because my life, my behaviors, my choices reflect His design, His will, His nature. And on the other hand, when I don't do what is right, what's that reflecting? Okay, now, that I think it's reflecting I'm not His. Here's the catch on this. So does that mean if I ever do anything that's not right, I'm no longer God's child? Well, I don't think that's what it means. I think what it means is I can't do wrong things as my lifestyle, as my pattern, and reflect the image, the nature of my Father God. When you look into your own life, that's the place to do this kind of detective work. It's a temptation. It always has been, and I think it always will be a temptation to want to shine the light of this thing, cast the lasso of truth on everybody but ourselves. You know, if you're not careful, you can use this verse as a proof text for why that person or that person or that person is not saved. That's not why John put it here. Why John put it here is because he is saying, I want to hold a mirror up for you. Look into your own life, your own patterns, your own habits, your own motivations. What do you see? Well, what I think we see is imperfect people who sometimes and maybe even often choose poorly. We sin. When that is the pattern of our life, when our habit is to sin, when our nature has been given full reign and we don't resist, we don't interrupt the cycle of sin by choice in partnership with Christ, how will we ever reflect our family resemblance? How will we ever bring light, the light of Christ, the image of God into the world? Anyone who does not do what is right is not God's child. Now, there's another aspect of those who do not do what is right. It isn't just that, oh, shoot, I nuts. I slipped up there. I didn't do what was right. No, when someone does not do what is right, a couple of things are implied by that very strongly. One is that they know what is right. It's not about the person who made a choice and later realized, oh, that wasn't a right choice. No, this is a person who knows what is right and they do not do it. This is a matter of willful choice. This is not a matter of accident. It's not a matter of uninformed or ignorant choice. This is about somebody who knows what is right and doesn't do it. You know, James, in the book of James, writes a little bit about this This was a verse that my mother used to quote to us kids, and I know why, but she would quote it. To him that knoweth to do the truth and doeth it not, to him it is sin. Of course, it was King James Version, but what's the point? If you know what's right and you don't do what's right, that's a sin. People who know what is right and don't do what is right, they choose not to do what is right. They're simply not God's child. And then, I think it kind of stands to reason that if you're going to be God's child, then you would need to reflect his nature. And, there are a lot of times even that we know what is right and we do it even though we don't want to do it. We kind of leave a skid mark where we've been drug into the right choice. Well, okay. Sometimes that's how it has to begin. And then John says, nor is anyone who does not love their brother and sister. Oh, well now, for me, I'm looking at the first part I often don't do what is right, but I really don't think it's because my will is turned away from God, where I'm deciding what's right and wrong instead of him deciding what's right and wrong. I still do wrong, and yet I want to do what is right. Well, that's the human condition. But then if that's not enough, then he smacks this in. If you don't love your brother and your sister, you're not. It's not that you can't be. You are not a child of God. Well, see, the one thing that most marks God's children is that they consistently, intentionally love one another. What did Jesus say? He said, I give you a new commandment. Love each other the way I have loved you. It's as though he lassoed the entire law and prophets, and he boiled it down to its most primary, strongest, imperative nut, okay? Love people the way Jesus loved them. Now, do you think Jesus argued often? Seemed like all the time when you read the Gospels, he argued with the Pharisees, with the scribes, with the teachers of the law, these highly religious people. Did he ever hate them? No. Did he ever not love them? No. You can be frustrated by people that you love. You can even be confrontive toward people you love. But there's a difference between that and not loving them. We have to go back to, so what is love? Love is me desiring to do for the other person what they really need. Love is my setting their interests up as, in most cases, more important than my own, at least as important as my own. And when we learn how to value people, even when I don't value their opinion, I can disregard someone's opinion without disregarding them, can't I? Well, no, you can't. You can't be on Twitter and Facebook. You can't do that with Instagram, for crying out loud. Well, yeah, you can. You can disagree with me without rejecting my value, because my ideas are not me. Okay. If you don't love your brother or sister, you're not a child of God. Now this is not for evaluating anybody but yourself. Look into your own mirror and judge. Okay, I do love my brother and sister. Now, there's one aspect of that. I don't think John is saying you have to love everybody in the world. And when he says brother and sister, he is centralizing the context here to people in God's family. there are people in God's family I disagree with. There are people in God's family that honestly, they kind of grind my gears. There are people in God's family that, well, if I was going on vacation, I probably wouldn't invite them to go with me. But that's about liking them. That's about clicking with them. That's about chemistry. But it may not be about love. However, if I do not desire their best interest and the best outcomes on their behalf, I'm not a child of God. See, because God's children reflect Him, and His design is always about the best, ultimate, real best interests of the people, of us, His creation. And we're to reflect that back to one another. Okay. Already blew past 15 minutes. I'll continue next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.